Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and if there's interest, maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. So if you have a request for a specific March of the Machine commander you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today, our commander is Sheoldred, the black-aligned Praetor. We've seen her as the Whispering One and the Apocalypse, and both are groan-inducing pains in the neck to sit across from. That is ironic, because after her return from Dominaria, she tried to seize power from Elesh Norn, so during Phyrexia's multiversal invasion, Sheoldred experienced a pain in her own neck. Of course, if you've seen my Elesh Norn video, linked in this video's description, you'll know that the Mother of Machines herself was also later decapitated. Turns out violent fascism doesn't pay. So before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander, which for this commander was a little bit of a challenge. I want to show off why this card is cool and why I put it in the commander deck. So whatever it wants me to do, I'm going to put 30 cards toward that. That's my game plan. It's what I try to do at the table and how I try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes I won't run any, sometimes, like this deck, I will run more because it plays into my game plan. And I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I hit my land drops and I can play the game. So let's talk about our commander. Sheoldred is 3 and double black for a 4/5 legendary Phyrexian Praetor with Menace. It's pretty good. And when Sheoldred enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker of their choice. Pretty great. And for 4 and a black, we can exile Sheoldred and return it to the battlefield transformed under our control, but only as a sorcery and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. When we do that, Sheoldred comes back as the True Scriptures. It's a saga, which means as soon as it enters, we're going to get a lore counter on it, and we will get another one at the start of our pre-combat main phase each of our turns. So, the first chapter is, for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. So, we get to blow more stuff up. Then chapter 2 is each opponent discards 3 cards and then mills 3 cards. And chapter 3 is put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. This is Rise of the Dark Realms, so pretty great. And then we also exile the saga and return it to the battlefield face up, which means it will come back as Sheoldred, and having entered as Sheoldred, it will again make our opponents sacrifice non-token creatures or planeswalkers. So Sheoldred is a classically black card. Everything she wants us to do is straight out of black cards from the 90s. She's an edict when she lands, and her backside is removal, hand attack, mill, and reanimation. And then another edict when she flips back over, just in case our opponents thought we were joking. But there's nothing funny about Shelly, which can sometimes mean there's nothing fun about her. This is a theme I try not to miss in these videos. Magic is a social game, and in Commander, the social side is even more important. We want to play the game, and that means trying to win, but it's the nature of some mechanics that our advantage comes at the cost not just of our opponent's advantage, but also their good time. And that sucks. Magic isn't a zero-sum game, and neither is the fun a group can have at it. We want our decks to play well, but that also means we should play nicely. Building decks with this in mind is good sportsmanship, and it's practical. The most hateful deck often gets hated out of the game first. So if we want to play with Sheoldred, we have to hit her on the slant. We're not going to be the most popular player at the table, but if we minimize our commander's annoyance factor, another player will emerge as public enemy number 1, and we'll be able to build out our board while they take the heat. But how do we keep ourselves from seeming like a typical scary Shelly deck? Why, we play our opponent's decks instead. Longtime viewers will know I don't love control magic effects in general, but sometimes that's where your commander takes you. And what better way to not play a terrifying mono-black monster than to play the terrifying rainbow of monsters our opponents have brought? After all, they can't complain about us fielding the very same creatures they were going to, right? Our deck is about putting our opponent's creatures in the ground from anywhere they might start out, the battlefield, their hands, and most especially their libraries. Once we get their bins full, we come around and empty them out onto our own playmat. Fully 1/5 of our deck is about reanimating creatures, ours, our opponents, or all of them, and then using them to keep our value rolling. As Alex Stacey put it, I ain't saying she's a grave digger, but she certainly pulls creatures out of the graveyard with startling efficiency. Words to live by. Like any good black deck, we have plenty of removal to keep our opponents in check and their graveyards full, including several board wipes to remind our opponents that their creatures actually belong 6 feet below their own feet. We get value from those creatures dying, and we have ways to make tokens and extra mana in the process. And as their ranks dwindle with their libraries, so too will their life totals thanks to our drain effects. And when, at last, their yards are well-tilled and well-filled, we can finally flip our commander and start proselytizing the true scriptures of Phyrexia. The glistening oil transforms us all, my brothers and sisters in Yawgmoth. We rise again in the dark realm of the Dross Pits, ready to proffer our Susurrus Phyresis to the entire multiverse. Where Gix failed, we shall succeed. And once our opponents' creatures are finally, all of them, complete, we'll send them home to meet their makers. You'll enjoy this deck if you like sharing in the fun of what your opponents have brought to the table, or if you like living the mono-black dream in which death is only the beginning. So as usual, this Moxfield page with the deck list is in the video's description below. At the bottom of that Moxfield list, you'll see a considering section, full of cards that I thought to put in and decided against eventually, sometimes because they were too expensive for the budget I was going for, sometimes because they went toward a specific type of goal that I wanted to be a little bit more general for. So if you want to build Sheoldred yourself, take a look in that considering section. It's a great place to get started. We are going to get started with our game plan, starting with a section I call Grave Robbing. These are cards that, in one way or another, let us take our opponent's cards that are in their graveyards out and use them for something. We start with Tiny Bones, the Pickpocket. Tiny Bones from Outlaws of Thunder Junction is a single black for a 1/1 legendary skeleton rogue with Death Touch. And it says whenever Tiny Bones deals combat damage to a player, we may cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard, and the mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So Tiny Bones fixes our mana when we get to do this. We have to choose a card as part of the resolution of this ability, but we get to resolve it we get to cast it as part of that resolution. So what's nice about Tiny Bones in our deck is we have so many ways to bring creatures back. Tiny Bones can get any non-land permanent that we can cast. So Tiny Bones can't hit instant sorceries or lands, but we can hit artifacts, we can hit enchantments, even planeswalkers and battles if we want to. We do have to cast them, rather pay for them, but we cast them as though our mana is any color. So pretty nice. Plus, a lot of the times Tiny Bones is just going to get in because Tiny Bones is a 1/1 Death Touch. Unless our opponent has a little token of some sort that they're willing to chump with, they're certainly not going to block our tiny little guy with their big monster and trade because of Death Touch. So yeah. Next we have Coffin Queen. Love this Kaya Folia art. Amazing. Coffin Queen is 2 and a black for a 1/1 zombie wizard that says we may choose not to untap Coffin Queen during our untap step. And for 2 and a black and tap, we can put a creature card from a graveyard, that's not just our graveyard, a graveyard, onto the battlefield under our control, and when that creature becomes untapped, when Coffin Queen becomes untapped, or we lose control of Coffin Queen, we exile the creature that was put into play. So Coffin Queen has a built-in Raise Dead, or Reanimate, I should say. We play the Coffin Queen, we let her untap, then we tap her +3, and we get to bring something back and keep it for as long as we have Coffin Queen, and Coffin Queen remains tapped. I think that's pretty great, because not only does that mean that we're getting a creature out of their graveyard, we're making it so they're not going to get to keep that creature even if they get rid of Coffin Queen. They can't regain it because it will be exiled. So yeah, pretty sweet. And again, what incredible art. Realmbreaker the Invasion Tree is next. This card is so much fun. It's a legendary artifact for 3 generic mana that says pay 2 and tap, target opponent mills 3 cards, then we put a land card from their graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under our control, and it gains if this land would leave the battlefield, we exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So that does not mean that we have to put a land from among those 3 milled cards. It's just any land they may have in their graveyard. So if we have an opponent who's playing like a Titania deck or something else where they're sacrificing their lands, we can take those lands from them. It doesn't even have to be a basic land. So if they use their Field of Ruin, or if somebody blows up their Glacial Chasm or something, we can steal those cards. But most of the time, we're going to be taking their cards that are mana producing specifically as a form of ramp for ourselves. In a way, once Realmbreaker is in play, we sort of pay Rampant Growth mana and tap it, and our opponent's going to mill 3 and we get to have our Rampant Growth, assuming they have any land in their graveyard. Realmbreaker also has a second mode, which is not relevant in this version of the deck, but if you put other copies of Sheoldred, like different versions, like Sheoldred the Apocalypse or Sheoldred Whispering One, into your 99, then it can be useful, because it is for 10 and tap and sacrifice Realmbreaker, search your library for any number of Praetor cards, put them on the battlefield, and then shuffle. Maybe you're even wanting to run Ebon Praetor. Probably not, but there you go. Usually, though, Realmbreaker is a way to have our opponents mill, and maybe, hopefully, do a little ramping. Next, we have our one battle in the deck. This is Invasion of Innistrad. For 2 and double black, we get a Siege. The way this works is there's a little 5 down here. It enters the battlefield with 5 defense counters on it, which are like loyalty counters on a Planeswalker in a way. It just comes in with those counters on it. Whenever it's our turn, we can choose to attack this Siege, because when it enters, we choose an opponent who will protect it. When we attack Invasion of Innistrad, our creatures will do damage to it, and that damage will, each damage will eat away one of these 5 defense counters, but our defending opponent can block with their creatures if they want to. Usually they won't, just depending on how things go at the table, but sometimes they will. In any case, what does it actually do? Invasion of Innistrad is 2 and double black for a battle with flash, so we can flash this in, and when it enters, a target creature that an opponent controls gets -13/-13 until end of turn. So we can definitely do this on our opponent to the right's turn, flash it in. Whichever opponent we want to defend it might have a pretty good creature, but we can kill that creature with this enters trigger, and then it goes to our turn. We can go ahead and attack Invasion of Innistrad and hopefully flip it, because once it hits 0, it gets exiled, and then we can cast it transformed for free. Deluge of the Dead is the enchantment side of it. It's what we get after we defeat it. When it enters, we make 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So just 2 free 2/2s. And for 2 and a black, we can exile a target card from a graveyard, and if it was a creature card, we make another zombie token. So this is a way that we might want to get rid of an opponent's creatures rather than giving ourselves the ability to reanimate them. I wanted to make this deck into the graveyard as a resource, and things go into the graveyard gives us more resources. So Deluge of the Dead is a great way for us to make tokens, even if we don't have the ability to reanimate creatures. We make it so no one else can get them back either, and we at least get zombies out of them. Liliana, Waker of the Dead, is the Planeswalker we've got in the deck. There's a few more in the considering section if you want to check those out. From M21, this Liliana is 2 and double black for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker, Liliana, of course. Her +1 ability is each player discards a card, and each opponent who can't loses 3 life. Can't means they don't have any cards in hand to discard. But this is great because it puts cards in our opponent's graveyards, which we want because Sheoldred can't flip until one of our opponents has 8 cards in their graveyard. It also lets us put cards in our graveyard, which is good because we want to be able to bring those back. For -3 loyalty, we can give target creature -X/-X, where X is the number of cards in our graveyard, not creature cards. So as big as our graveyard is, this removal effect is going to get better and better. And if we can get Liliana up to -7, which I hope we can because it's pretty sweet, we get an emblem, which says at the beginning of combat on our turn, we put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control and it gains haste. Again, that is from a graveyard, not necessarily our graveyard. We steal the best creature in any graveyard and it gains haste. We can attack with it right away. Pretty alright. Next from Final Fantasy is the Darkness Crystal, mostly in this deck as ramp, but the Darkness Crystal is 2 and double black for a legendary artifact that makes all of our black spells cost 1 generic less to cast. And if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it and you gain 2 life. So this is a little bit of a non-bow for us in some ways. But there's a lot of ways for us to get our opponent's cards into their graveyard without those creatures dying. We're doing some milling, we're doing a little bit of discard, but if our opponent's creatures do die, with the Darkness Crystal out, instead of them going to the graveyard, they will get exiled under the Darkness Crystal, and will gain 2 life for each one that died that way, or that would have died that way, I should say. And then, for 4 and double black and tap, we can put a creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield under our control with 2 1/1 counters on it. So that means anything that's died while the Darkness Crystal's out, if we're willing to pay 6 mana each turn, we can put those things out each turn and have counters on them. And the nice part is, it doesn't say activate only as a sorcery. So we can do this during our opponent to the right's end step. We can do this in the middle of combat when an opponent attacks us. We can do this in response to one of our opponents trying to reanimate one of their creatures. Seems pretty good to me. Plus, the ramp effect. Next we have Chainer, Dementia Master. This card is so cool. A 3/3 legendary human minion for 3 and double black that gives all nightmares +1/+1, and has the ability, if we pay 3 black and 3 life, we can put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. Again, a graveyard. And that creature is black and is a nightmare in addition to its other creature types. So again, this is at instant speed. We can do this middle of combat, we can do this in response to someone targeting a card in their graveyard. It costs us 3 life, which is alright. It costs us 3 black, which is great. And it's going to come back as a nightmare, which means it's going to get +1/+1. So it's even better than it would have been in our opponent's graveyard. It's worth mentioning we can also hit our own creatures with these things because it says a graveyard. But what we're looking to do is get our opponent's creatures in the graveyard and use things like Chainer and all of our other grave robbing spells to bring them back under our control. However, when Chainer leaves the battlefield, exile all nightmares. So we don't get to keep these tokens, or these creatures rather, but no one else is going to get a chance to get them either. They get exiled just the same way that Coffin Queen was doing. So actually, Chainer is pretty similar to Coffin Queen, albeit a little bit better, but also 2 more mana. So yeah. From the Catacombs is next. From the Catacombs is a sorcery for 3 and double black that says put target creature card from a graveyard, again a graveyard, onto the battlefield under our control with a corpse counter on it. We take the initiative. I'll talk about that in a second. And if that creature would leave the battlefield in exile instead of putting it anywhere else. So again, it's the Coffin Queen sort of feel, and this corpse counter is sort of like a precursor to finality counters, so you can think of it in that way. The corpse counter doesn't do anything on its own, it's just meant to help you remember that if this creature would leave the battlefield instead it gets exiled. From the Catacombs also has Escape for the same cost, and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So if we have milled a bunch of cards, and maybe or cast some cards, and we have non-creatures in our graveyard that we don't really need, we can always play from the Catacombs from our graveyard by paying 3 and double black and exiling 5 of those cards we don't need, and it just comes back and we have to cast it again. Then it goes to the graveyard again, and we can do it a second time if we wanted to, or continue to, as long as we can keep exiling other cards from our graveyard, and just steal creatures from anyone's graveyard, including our own. But I mentioned take the initiative. We're going to talk about the initiative briefly. So, the initiative looks like this. It's a special mechanic that's sort of a development on the Monarch mechanic. What it means is, whenever one or more creatures a player controls deal combat damage to the person with the initiative, the person who controlled those creatures that did the damage takes the initiative. In addition, the card that we were just looking at has us take the initiative. So the initiative is just a designation that one person has, and they will keep it until someone does combat damage to them with their creatures. And whenever we take the initiative, either by taking it from casting that spell, taking it by retaking it once we've done combat damage to a different player that has the initiative, or if we just keep it and we get back to our upkeep, this will also trigger at the beginning of our upkeep, we venture into the Undercity. Every time we take the initiative or we have it at the beginning of our upkeep, we venture into the Undercity. And this is the Undercity. It's a dungeon. We get a little marker, put this on the table, put the marker in the secret entrance, and we get to do what the secret entrance says, which is search our library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. That's just lay of the land, so we will find ourselves a swamp. Then, every time we would take the initiative, or go to our upkeep when we still have the initiative, we will venture into the next room. We get to choose which place we're going. We move our little marker around, like if we are at the secret entrance, maybe we want to go to the forge, and we'll put 2/1/1 counters on a creature. Then the next time, we will move to either the arena or the trap, but we can't go backwards, we can't go sideways through the walls. If we're in the forge, we can't choose to next go to the stash, because we'd have to go to the Lost Well to get to the stash. And we will keep doing that until we have gone to the Throne of the Dead 3 and completed the Undercity. And if, after having completed the Undercity, we still have the initiative in our next upkeep, or we retake it later, we will go back to the secret entrance and lay of the land again. So the initiative will remain in the game for the rest of the game once it is introduced. And I think it's pretty fun. So we're going back to our From the Catacombs. We've seen what it does. It takes us the initiative, it brings the creature back with essentially a finality counter on it, and we can escape it. Next is Junji, the Midnight Sky from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. This is 3 and double black for a 5/5 legendary dragon spirit with flying and menace, so pretty good evasion. But if it does die, when Junji dies, we either have each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life, which can be pretty good, or we can put target non-dragon creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control, and we lose 2 life. So this lets us reanimate something as long as it isn't a dragon. Seems pretty good. That does mean we can't reanimate Junji themselves. But yeah. Next we have Path of the Schemer, which has a little bit of a Will of the Planeswalkers thing on it. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is a sorcery for 4 and a black that says each player mills 2 cards. Then we put a creature card from a graveyard, onto the battlefield under our control, and it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So this is really another 5 mana reanimate spell, but it does get 2 cards of mill for each player, including us. So we can pick one of our creatures or one of our opponent's creatures, as we have been. However, if we are playing with Plane Chase cards, Will of the Planeswalkers also is effective. It says, starting with us, each player votes for Planeswalk or Chaos. If Planeswalk gets more votes, we Planeswalk. If Chaos gets more votes, or if the vote is tied, then Chaos ensues. None of this matters if you are not playing Planeswalk, or Plane Chase rather. But if you have the ability to play Plane Chase, you probably should. It's really fun. It's a great way to do more silly, wacky, unpredictable games of Commander. So see if you can find yourself a Plane Chase deck and get to playing. But even without it, this as just a reanimate a card from any graveyard, it becomes an artifact, and also everyone's going to mill 2 first. That's pretty sweet for 5 mana. Next we have the Cruelty of Gix, which if you played Standard in the last few years, you probably remember before Dominaria and United rotated. 3 and double black for a saga with Read Ahead. Read Ahead means normally a saga starts on chapter 1, it goes to chapter 2, and then goes to chapter 3 and it's done. Read Ahead means if we want, we can have it start on chapter 2, and we just never get chapter 1. Or we can have it start on chapter 3, we won't get chapters 1 and 2, and after this is resolved, it just goes to the graveyard. So good flexibility if we don't want to wait to get to chapter 3 or maybe chapter 2, or if we just don't need the earlier effects. But those effects are, chapter 1, target opponent reveals their hand, we choose a creature or planeswalker, and they discard it. So discard, a little rude, but it's not terrible. Chapter 2 is Grim Tutor. Search your library for a card of any sort, put that card into your hand, and then shuffle, and then you lose 3 life. Pretty good. Any card you need, you've got it. Especially if you already played this on chapter 1 on the previous turn. Now you're starting your turn, you've drawn your card, chapter 2 triggers, you lose 3 life, but you get whatever card you need for that turn. It's great. And then finally, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So again, we're robbing graves, even if it may be our own. Another saga, a saga that it's just a perennial favorite for me in black decks. The Eldest Reborn, originally from Dominaria, 2018. 4 and a black for a saga that does not have Read Ahead, so you have to start with chapter 1, which is each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker of their choice. It could be a token, but that's okay. Chapter 2, each opponent discards a card. And remember, this is opponents, it's not us. And then finally, put a target creature card or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Again, it's a graveyard, so we can steal one of our opponent's creatures if we want to, or get one of our own. Next, we have Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. What incredible art from Chase Stone. Look how amazing this is. Just, it's stunning. 4 and a black for a legendary sorcery. Legendary sorceries are special. We cannot cast them unless we control a legendary creature or planeswalker. So if our commander is in play, or even Tiny Bones is in play, we can cast Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. But without a legendary creature in play, we can't even put this on the stack. So something worth remembering. What does it do though? It lets us put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control and destroy a creature or planeswalker, and then we exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. So it's nice that it does it in this order, because not only does that fit the flavor of the scene, it also makes it so people wouldn't be confused that you can't do the same creature here. Even if it said destroy and then put something onto the battlefield, if you were to rearrange these sentences, you still wouldn't be able to do the same creature because it's asking you to target both times, so those targets have to be chosen while it's on the stack, or once it's going onto the stack as you're casting it. So in any case, this lets us do a nice 5 mana reanimation and also kill something. Seems good. Next is Geth, Lord of the Vault. Geth is a 5/5 legendary Phyrexian zombie for 4 and double black. Geth has Intimidate, which is sort of a precursor to Menace. It means that Geth cannot be blocked except by artifact creatures or creatures that are black, because Geth is black. So in a way, it's like Fear, just because Geth is black, if you want to go even farther back. But yeah, so anything that doesn't have black in its color identity or is an artifact can't block Geth. Also, for X and a black, we can put target artifact or creature card with mana value X from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under our control, and then that player mills X cards. So it doesn't cost us anything other than mana. We can do this at instant speed. We don't have to tap Geth for it. We can do it multiple times per turn if we want. We can just steal people's creatures and their artifacts, and they have to mill based on whatever we've paid for X. Amazing. What's nice though is, or worth remembering, is it says we get to get an artifact or creature card with mana value X. It doesn't say X or less. So we can't just pump all of our mana into this and then get someone's Soul Ring out of their graveyard and have them mill a whole lot of cards. It's got to be exactly the same number as their mana value, but still worth doing. Next, from the Assassin's Creed set, this card is so crazy, but it's good in this deck. 6 generic mana for Staff of Eden, Vault's Key. This is a legendary artifact that when it enters, we put a legendary permanent with a different name than this from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. Now, that means we don't get anything if there aren't any legendary permanents in any graveyards, or if there aren't any legendary permanents other than another copy of Staff of Eden, Vault's Key. However, Staff of Eden says we can tap it and draw a card for each permanent we control but don't own. So any of these creatures that we have brought back, we're going to be able to draw cards for them every turn as we tap Staff of Eden. Pretty sweet. Obviously, we have to have Breach the Multiverse. It's such a great mill card. It's such a great Reanimator card. It's from March of the Machine, and it's beautiful. It's one of the first times we actually get to see like a depiction of the Blind Eternities, kind of. So Breach the Multiverse is 5 and double black for a sorcery that says each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker in that player's graveyard, not necessarily from the ones that were milled, and put those cards onto the battlefield under your control, and then each creature you control, all of our creatures, becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types, because all will be one. So this is a great way for us to get everyone's libraries into their graveyards. Just mill 10. That immediately fulfills the requirement of our commander in order for her to flip. And we get to reanimate something for each player other than us, or for each player including us, I should say. And then all of our creatures become Phyrexians. Pretty nice. Just a nice little bonus. Next, we have Necromantic Selections, one of our Wraths. For 4 and triple black, so pretty expensive sorcery. It says destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types, and then exile Necromantic Selection. So this means we can get a creature from anyone's graveyard, but it has to be a creature that was put in the battlefield, put into the graveyard rather, right here. Creature card put into the graveyard this way, meaning with Necromantic Selection. So if an opponent already has a cool creature in their graveyard, Necromantic Selection won't let us bring it back. We can only bring back something that dies because it was destroyed by Necromantic Selection. What's important to remember, though, about the Wraths in this deck is that if we flip our commander to her backside and then cast a Wrath, either that same turn or the following turn before she has come back, she doesn't die, because while she's got her Saga side up, she's not a creature, of course. So that's a good way for us to protect her. In addition, even though it's a lot of mana, Necromantic Selection is pretty sweet. It destroys every creature on the battlefield. And if we do that while our commander is on Chapter 2, like let's say we've last turn flipped our commander, transformed her, and we've just triggered the Chapter 2, because it's the second turn, we cast Necromantic Selection, everything dies, we get one thing back, then there's one more turn cycle of our opponents presumably trying to rebuild their boards, and then everything that we've killed gets to come back as our commander's third chapter ability triggers, and we get Rise of the Dark Realms. All of the creatures come back. Pretty fun with these Wraths, especially Necromantic Selection, because it's just big monsters. Sepulchral Primordial is next. Also 5 and double black for a 5/4 avatar. It also has Intimidate, so again, it can only be blocked by artifact creatures and or creatures that have some black in them. When the Primordial enters, for each opponent, we can put up to one target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. So it's multiple reanimations, one for each opponent. Pretty good. And I mean, 5/4 with not really menace, but a kind of evasion. It's pretty good. Next, I love Eldraine. Virtue of Persistence is 5 and double black for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So we just get to keep doing this turn after turn after turn at the start of our upkeep. The same way that we would be doing with Liliana, except Liliana grants those creatures haste, but they come in at the start of combat. So Virtue of Persistence is excellent repeated reanimation, but also Virtue of Persistence has an adventure, a sorcery called Locthwain's Scorn. It says target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn, and you gain 2 life. So this is removal for us for something that has a toughness of 3 or less, or if we're able to use it in conjunction with an attack or a block, we can kill something with this. And if you're unfamiliar with adventures, the way this works is while you have this card in your hand, you can either play it as Virtue of Persistence, and then you just get the Virtue of Persistence effect, or you can play it as Locthwain's Scorn, and when Locthwain's Scorn is resolved, instead of going to the graveyard, this card will go into exile, and we can cast Virtue of Persistence from exile later on. The only thing you can't do is cast Virtue of Persistence, put it on the battlefield, and then while it's there, cast Locthwain's Scorn. You either have to do the enchantment, or you can do the adventure, and then later the enchantment. Next, we have Afterlife from the Loam, from the Tarkir Dragonstorm commander decks. 5 and triple black. It's a lot. But it has Delve. Delve is each card we exile from our graveyard while casting the spell pays for a generic mana. So again, a good way like that escape card that we can use the non-creature spells, the spells we don't want to, or the cards we don't want to bring back necessarily, we can use them to pay for Afterlife from the Loam. We may end up only paying 3 black for it. And what it does is for each player, choose one creature card in that player's graveyard and put those cards onto the battlefield under our control. They're zombies in addition to their other types. What's nice is that's each player, not each opponent. So we get to get our own creature back as well. So even for 8 mana, this is pretty good. It's for 2 mana per player, assuming 3 opponents reanimate something from their graveyard. Pretty good. Next, we have Arden the Usurper from the Final Fantasy set. 5 and triple black for a 4/4 legendary Elder Human Noble. So that seems like a pretty expensive 4/4. However, it gives demons we control, menace, lifelink, and haste. Do we have any demons in our deck? Doesn't look like there's any demons. Oh, there's one demon in our deck, just the one. You know, I think we've seen it already, in fact. So why do we have this if we don't have any demons in our deck? Well, the reason is because Arden has an ability called Star Scourge, which says at the beginning of combat on our turn, we exile up to 1 target creature card from a graveyard. That's just getting rid of these creatures. And if we exile a card that way, we make a token copy of it, except that top copy is a 5/5 black demon. Which means whatever we make it a token copy of, it will be a 5/5 black menace, lifelink, haste demon. So if we were to get, I don't know, Baneslayer Angel with this, it would become a 5/5 menace, lifelink, haste, flying, first strike angel demon. No, actually it wouldn't be an angel, it would only be a demon. But it still would have protection from demons and dragons, so there you go. Anyway, this is a great way to reanimate things without actually reanimating them. They get exiled before they come back, quote unquote, because they are coming back as tokens, and those tokens are 5/5 black demons. And as long as we have Arden in play, those demons are going to have menace, lifelink, and haste. So yeah. Finally, I almost made Rise of the Dark Realms its own category in this deck because it's so cool, and we have a couple of other cards that can do it in the considering section, as well as our commander does it on her back side. Rise of the Dark Realms, reprinted and foundations. It's currently only $3 on Mana Pool, it looks like, is 7 and double black for a sorcery that puts all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under our control. That's crazy. Just the biggest, coolest, splashiest black spell. Love this card. So yeah, that covers our grave robbing section. Let's talk about all of our reanimate spells. We've seen a lot of these already. I think there's 4 or so in here that can reanimate something that we haven't actually looked at yet. There may be some more. We'll take a look. Starting with Black Sun's Twilight. It's an instant for X and a black that gives up to 1 target creature -X/-X until end of turn. So it's a removal spell. But if X is 5 or more, we also return a creature card with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this reanimates something. It's not a grave robbing spell, so it can only hit our creatures. But we get to bring a creature back, as long as we're willing to spend a total of 6 mana. And 5 mana is the going rate to bring something back from the graveyard anyway, unless you're zombifying, I guess. So kill something, bring something back, same spell, instant speed for both effects. Seems good. Next we have Stitch Together. For double black, it's a sorcery that raises dead, returns a creature from our graveyard to our hand. But if we have Threshold, meaning if we have 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we instead return that card from our graveyard to the battlefield. So a 2 mana reanimate as long as we have enough cards in our graveyard. And the creature card we're talking about can be one of those 7. We've seen Coffin Queen. Coffin Queen can reanimate creatures in any graveyard. Liliana can, with her ultimate, reanimate an awful lot of things, just any cards in any graveyard. Darkness Crystal will exile our opponent's creatures when they die, but we can bring them back with the Darkness Crystal, of course. Chainer brings creatures back. From the Catacombs brings a creature back. Junji can bring things back. You know how Reanimate works. All of these cards that we've seen will do the same thing. So will these, and so will these. So we essentially only need to talk about Black Sun's Twilight and Stitch Together because these other 18 cards in this section don't just reanimate, they reanimate from our opponent's graveyards if we want to. But how are we filling those graveyards? We're filling with milling. We've got a bunch of cards that will help us mill our opponents, starting with Ghoul Caller's Bell. So cheap, both in like currency and in mana. It's a 1 generic mana artifact that if we tap it, everyone mills a card, including us. So we get to put stuff in our graveyard, which is helpful for us. It's 1 card in everyone's graveyard, so that's 12.5% of the way toward getting to that 8 card threshold we need to hit for our commander to flip. Seems good. Next we have Grindstone, which I'm using the Thunder Junction Breaking News bonus sheet printing for. because it's one of the more cheap ones. For a single mana, we get an artifact that if we pay 3 and tap it, target player mills 2 cards, and if 2 cards that share a color were milled this way, repeat this process. So we can have them mill more than 2, perhaps. Slightly more expensive to make one person mill 2 cards than just the millstone, which I thought about putting in, but it can make someone mill 4 cards. And that's usually pretty good, especially if you choose the opponent properly. Because if someone's playing just like a 2-color deck or even a 1-color deck, it's pretty good chances. Next is Vicious Rumors from Guilds of Ravnica. I love this card. A single black for a sorcery gets you 4 effects. It deals 1 damage to each opponent discards a card, each opponent mills a card, and then we gain 1 life. So everyone loses a life except us, we gain 1. Everyone is down a card from their hand and down a card from their library. Pretty good. Notice that if they weren't empty-handed, this means everyone's got 2 cards in their graveyard now. Pretty alright. Dread Summons is next, from Foundations. Love this card. Originally from Foundations? No, definitely not, but just really fun in Foundations Limited. X and double black for a sorcery that has each player mill X cards. That includes us. And for each creature card put into a graveyard this way, we make a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So everyone mills X cards. Let's say we spend 6 mana on this, so X equals 4. That's everyone putting 4 cards in their graveyard, and whichever cards that put in the graveyard this way were creatures, we're going to get tapped zombies. That's pretty fun. Hopefully we get lots of zombies, because hopefully we put a bunch of creatures in the graveyard, but the zombies are sort of incidental to the fact that those creatures got into the graveyard. And if our opponents were milled, let's say we spent, like I said, 6 mana on the spell, so that X equals 4, that's half of the way toward meeting the 8-card threshold for us to flip our commander. Next is Mindcrank. Mindcrank is the most expensive card in the deck. There are a couple of other cards that I could have put in that were more expensive or similarly expensive, but this one's just so good in our deck. You could definitely make this a little bit more budget-wise. I try not to put cards that are, $10 or more if I can help it, but our commander is a little expensive too. So we still were able to keep it to a relatively normal budget. In any case, Mindcrank is 2 generic mana for an artifact that says whenever an opponent loses life, they mill that many cards. So this is when they lose life from us or our creatures, or from any other way. If opponent A attacks opponent B for 10 damage, opponent B is going to mill 10 cards, and that just helps us out. It gives us a chance to hit our threshold for our commander to flip, but also puts cards in their graveyard that we can steal or use in other ways. Next we have Nuclear Fallout. What a cool card. This is from the Fallout Commander decks. It is X and double black for a sorcery that gives each creature twice -X until end of turn. So basically, if we put 1 mana in the X for a total of 3, every creature is going to get -2/-2. And every player is going to get X rad counters. So let's say we spent 5 mana on this total. 2 black and then 3 generic. Each creature is going to get -6/-6, and each player is going to get 3 rad counters. Makes sense. So now, what is a rad counter? And if this is just a board wipe, why is it in our mill section? Well, radiation works like this. At the beginning of every player's pre-combat main phase, if they have any rad counters, they mill a number of cards equal to the rad counters. And for each non-land card they mill that way, they lose a life and they lose a rad counter. So they may be milling quite a long time, as long as they just keep milling lands. Anytime they mill something that's not a land, they're going to lose a life from it, and they're going to get rid of a rad counter in the process. So those rad counters will stick around milling everyone. And they may be able to discharge all of them. Like, let's say we have X equals 3 on that Fallout card. They only get 3 rad counters at the beginning of their pre-combat main phase. Maybe they mill 3 non-lands, so they get rid of all their rad counters and lose 3 life right away. That's still okay. We've gotten them to mill at least 3 cards because that was our X. So when we put this X here, we know that any creature with twice X or less in their toughness is going to die. And we know that each player is going to end up, even though not right away, on their next turn at least, milling at least X cards. They'll mill X cards on their next turn. The turn after that, they may still have rad counters, so they may mill more. But yeah, it's a floor for the amount of milling they're going to be doing. What a cool card. We've seen Realmbreaker and how Realmbreaker makes a target opponent mill 3 cards, and we can steal a land from their graveyard when they do. Grisly Spectacle is a removal spell with mill in it. 2 and double black for an instant that destroys a non-artifact creature. So it's go for the throat. But also, that creature's controller mills cards equal to that creature's power. So if someone throws a Galta out there, we can kill Galta for 4 mana and have that player mill 12 cards. It seems pretty alright to me. Next is Mindrack Harpy, just a classic in Sheoldred decks. 3 and a black for a 3/2 flying enchantment creature, Harpy, that says at the beginning of combat on our turn, every player mills 3 cards. So as long as we cast this pre-combat, 2 turns later, if it hasn't died and we make it to combat then, we've met our threshold for Sheoldred to flip, because everyone will have milled 3 cards 3 turns in a row. Pretty alright. One ring to rule them all. We got a lot of sagas in this deck. I love sagas. 2 and double black for an enchantment saga from Lord of the Rings that says, Chapter 1, the ring tempts you, then each player mills cards equal to your ring bearer's power. Now I know you're questioning, what in the world does it mean for the ring to tempt us? Well, we're going to look at one last one of these little tokens. Alright, the ring. When the ring tempts us, we get an emblem named the ring, if we don't already have one, and then it gains its next ability, and we choose a creature we control to become our ring bearer or to remain our ring bearer. We only have one card in the deck that says the ring tempts you, I believe, so we're only going to get just the first level ability. We can still be tempted if we don't have a creature. The ring gains its abilities from top to bottom. You know, when it tempts us, we have to choose a creature if we control one. And of course, we can only have one emblem named the ring, and only one ring bearer at a time. All that makes sense. Here's what the ring actually gives us. The first level is our ring bearer becomes legendary, and it cannot be blocked with creatures with greater power. So if our ring bearer is a 4/4, it can't be blocked by anything with power 5 or greater. And then if we were able, somehow, to continue being tempted by the ring, then we would, the next time, get the next ability. When the ring bearer attacks, we loot. And then when the ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller will sacrifice it at the end of combat. And if we get all the way to the end, whenever our ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, that each opponent will lose 3 life. We're probably not going to get beyond just this, because being tempted by the ring is only something that one of our cards is going to do for us. But it's still a nice little bit of extra value for us. So if we put this on our commander, let's say, each player is going to mill 4, because Sheoldred's power is 4. Sheoldred will be our ring bearer at that point. Second chapter, destroy all non-legendary creatures, which is great, because if we didn't put it on our commander, if we put it on one of our creatures that was not legendary, remember, the first ability that being a ring bearer confers is that the creature is legendary. So it protects the creature that we've made our ring bearer from the second chapter of One Ring to Rule Them All. Finally, chapter 3, each opponent loses 1 life for each creature card in their graveyard. Pretty great with our deck. We've seen Path of the Schemer, makes everyone mill 2. Now let's talk about Sir Conrad. Love this guy. 3 and double black for a 5/4 legendary human knight that does 2 things. Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent when one of 3 conditions is met. The first condition is another creature dies. Just as long as any creature dies, Sir Conrad will deal a damage to each opponent. Second condition, a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. That means being discarded, that means being milled, whatever it may be. If a creature goes to the graveyard, whether it has died or been put there from somewhere else, Sir Conrad will deal that 1 damage to each opponent. Sir Conrad also deals damage to each opponent when a creature leaves our graveyard. So anytime we would reanimate a creature, or if someone tries to stop us from reanimating creatures and they exile our graveyard, those creatures are all leaving our graveyard, so Sir Conrad will deal 1 damage to each opponent then. Lot of ping from Sir Conrad. And for 1 and a black, we can make each player mill 1 card. That's pretty good. That's us paying 1 and a black, and we can do it over and over and over if we want to pump more mana into it, as opposed to, say, Ghoul Caller's Bell, which each player milling 1 card happens only once per turn because we have to tap it. Next, we've seen Geth, Lord of the Vault, and how Geth makes a player mill if we reanimate a creature from their graveyard. Next, we have Keening Stone. Keening Stone is 6 generic mana for an artifact, and it costs 5 to activate. But when we do, and tap it, a target player will mill an amount of cards equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. So if one of our opponents has 20 cards in their graveyard, they mill 20. The next turn, they're going to have 40 cards in their graveyard at least, so they'll mill 40. And that's basically the end of the game for that player. Keening Stone can definitely kill our opponents, and even though mill is an important part of our deck, it's not really like a win con. Keening Stone can change that. But in any case, even if an opponent has like 4 cards in their graveyard, if we want, we could play Keening Stone, pay 5, tap it, and now we're at the threshold we need to get to in order to flip Sheoldred. Even that's pretty good. Next, from also Fallout, Screeching Scorchbeast. 4 and double black for a 5/5 bat mutant with flying and menace that says whenever this creature attacks, each player gets 2 rad counters. Each player, that's us 2. Every time this attacks, doesn't matter who it's attacking, everyone's going to get 2 rad counters, which again means everyone's going to mill at least 2 cards on their next turn. Or they're going to mill 2 cards on their next turn and at least 2 cards total, because they may continue to mill on subsequent turns. And whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, we may create that many 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens. Just do this once each turn. So we attack with our Scorch Beast, then our opponent to the left is going to go to their pre-combat main phase. They're going to mill their cards, and if they mill all lands, then no trigger here. If they mill any non-lands, which is to say they're losing life and rad counters, then we're also going to get a single mutant. Or, I'm sorry, we're going to get that many mutants. Pretty good. And it'll happen again on the next player's turn and the next player's turn. And on our turn. So we keep getting all these little 2/2 zombie mutant friends with the rad counters causing people to be milled. And then if this isn't killed, we attack with it again on our next turn. Again, everyone gets 2 rad counters and we're back on the escalator. We've seen Breach the Multiverse, makes everyone mill 10, and that is our mill section. We have one last section that we want to get into before we go to our support, and I called it our graveyard section. Graveyard section, it's representative of the cards that don't mill everyone, they only mill us. I could have called that self-mill, but there are also cards that might cause us to discard. This is a section that's about us entombing things, us putting things into our graveyard. So yeah, I know it's a little bit confusing, but that's why I explained it. So Ghoul Caller's Bell makes everyone mill 1, puts cards in our graveyard. Dread Summons makes everyone mill, puts cards in our graveyard. Nuclear Fallout has us mill just like everyone else from these rad counters. Ripples of Undeath is 1 and a black for an enchantment that says at the beginning of our first main phase, we mill 3 cards. And then we can pay a single generic mana and 3 life, and if we do, we can put one of the cards we milled into our hand. So this is a great way to fill our graveyard, but also to just get some card advantage. Would you pay 3 life and a single generic mana to get the best card you need from 3 cards you just milled? I sure would. I'd probably do it a bunch of times. It's okay to spend your life and your mana to get cards that are going to get you a bigger advantage, because sometimes it feels like, oh no, I'm getting too low on my life, I better not spend it. But it doesn't matter how much life you have left if all your opponents are dead. That's what card advantage can get you. Cemetery Tampering is next, from Streets of New Capenna. Love this set. 2 and a black for an enchantment with Hideaway 5. What that means is when this enters, we look at the top 5 of our library, we can exile one of them face down under Cemetery Tampering, and in a random order the rest go on the bottom of our library. And then, at the beginning of our upkeep, we may, if we wish, and we should always, mill 3 cards. Then, if there are 20 or more cards in our graveyard, we can play the card that we exiled with Hideaway 5 without paying its mana cost. So that all happens before we draw for the turn. Pretty sweet. Just even as a way to just do a consistent 3-card mill, we're getting that from Ripples of Undeath as well. So this is a great way for us to keep our graveyard filled and probably get some sweet creatures in it that we can reanimate ourselves. Mindrak Harpy, at the beginning of combat on our turn, everyone mills, so that means us. Dreadhound, an excellent backup to Sir Conrad, says for 4 and double black, we get a 6/6 creature Demon Dog, and when it enters, we mill 3 cards. And then, whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is not damage like Sir Conrad, it's just straight life loss, but it's only half as much of the time, because it's creatures dying, just like Sir Conrad, or creatures going to the graveyard from the library. But it doesn't trigger if a creature gets discarded the way Sir Conrad does, and it wouldn't trigger if a creature leaves the graveyard, because that in the way that Sir Conrad does. So the Dreadhound is half as much of Sir Conrad, but pretty good in that process, and having a backup is nothing to sneeze at, especially one that mills us a little bit. Finally, we've got the Screeching Scorch Beast, which, as I mentioned before, gives consistent rad counters every time it attacks. So that covers our game plan. That's most of the cards that we care about that are doing the big brunt of our work. We're going to start talking about these sections of support for our game plan, beginning with our card advantage section. As usual, I use the word draw to represent this section. It's just a signifier for card advantage. It doesn't necessarily mean that every card we're getting here is an actual draw effect. Mind Stone is really more of a ramp card, but it can draw us a card. For 2 generic mana, it is an artifact that taps for colorless, pretty good for ramp, and if we need to, we can pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. Just turn it in for a card that we can use later on. Ripples of Undeath, we just saw. It gives us the ability to, when we mill 3, pay a generic mana and 3 life to take one of the cards we mill to put it in our hand. Again, that's not drawing a card, but it is giving us a card that we weren't going to get otherwise, so card advantage. Stitch Get Together, if we're not returning something from the graveyard to the battlefield because we don't have Threshold yet, we're just getting a creature card from our graveyard back to our hand. That's good. Next is Waste Not. Waste Not is in this deck as a synergy piece for the small but significant amount of discard that we have in this deck, both on the backside of our commander and in the form of some of the other cards that we're running. Waste Not is 1 and a black for an enchantment that says whenever an opponent discards a card, based on that card's type, we get a little bonus. If they discard a creature, we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. If they discard a land, we add 2 black mana to our mana pool. And if they discard anything else, a non-creature, non-land, we draw a card. So them putting creatures in their graveyard and us getting a creature for it, pretty great. Them throwing away a land, yeah, we may not be able to use this black mana when it's on their turn, but a lot of our effects are making our opponents discard cards on our turn, so we can sure use that mana then. And any kind of discard that's happening that's not a creature or a land will draw us a card. It is worth recognizing that all of this happens whenever our opponents discard cards, whether or not they are discarding them to an effect we control. So if they were to cast, Thrill of Possibility or Tormenting Voice or Demand Answers, one of these kind of, red spell that requires you to also discard a card in order to draw 2, they've discarded a card, so Waste Not's going to trigger. If somebody is discarding a card to make a creature indestructible or whatever other effect they may have that's asking them to discard a card, yeah, Waste Not's going to trigger and we're going to get something good out of it. Ayara, First of Lochthwain. A lot of Lochthwain in this deck. Triple black for a 2/3 legendary elf noble from Throne of Eldraine that says whenever Ayara or another black creature we control enters, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life. So anytime we have our black creatures come in, including Ayara, we're going to drain each opponent for 1 and we're going to gain 1. So pretty nice there with Ayara, but we can also tap Ayara and sacrifice another black creature to just draw a card. Now, we may not be able to bring back our opponent's creatures that are always going to be black creatures, so we can't always sacrifice them to Ayara. But if we do bring back a black creature, whether it's ours or our opponent's, we can always turn it into a card draw if we need to, if maybe, the combat math looks like it has turned in a direction that's not our favor. Maybe we block with a creature and then sacrifice it to draw before combat damage. Maybe we're attacking and they pump their creature up, so we sacrifice ours, so they're down a card from the pump. We could definitely make good use of Ayara, even without this excellent sort of Blood Artist-y style trigger. Or it's just a drain trigger because it enters, not dies, but you know what I mean. We've got Braids, Arisen Nightmare. 1 and double black for a 3/3 legendary Nightmare. It's a Nightmare. So that means Chainer can get rid of Braids, unfortunately. So something worth looking out for. Braids says, at the beginning of our end step, we may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. And if we do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent of their choice that shares a card type with whatever we sacrificed. And for each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and we draw a card. I played this in a Commander game yesterday, and it was me drawing a card, drawing 3 cards during my end step. You know, several different turns in a row. Braids can give us a lot of card advantage. Cemetery Tampering, we've seen, it gives us advantage when we have 20 or more cards in our graveyard, and we can play a card for free from underneath it. Morbid Opportunist, really great. Whenever 1 or more creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is a 1/3 human rogue for 2 and a black that gives us a once per turn draw a card effect, as long as creatures have died. They don't have to die on our turn or due to our creatures or effects. If we kill a creature with a kill spell, Morbid Opportunist will draw us a card if it hasn't already drawn us a card this turn. But if our opponent B is attacking opponent C and some of the creatures die in the process, we're going to draw a card from Morbid Opportunist that turn as well. Next we have Dread Presence, just a great card for any mono black deck. Or plenty of decks that just have black in other ways. 3 and a black for a 3/3 Nightmare. It's another Nightmare that says whenever a swamp we control enters, choose 1, we either draw a card and lose a life, or Dread Presence deals 2 damage to any target and we gain 2 life. So that any target is great because we can hit our opponents with it, but we can also hit creatures and planeswalkers, or even our battle if we want to. Being able to zot something for 2 damage and then gain 2 life off of it just because we played a swamp, of which we have quite a few, pretty great. But if we need card advantage, we've got that too. We've seen from the Catacombs how, at the very least, it does reanimate a creature, but it also takes us the initiative. So if we didn't already have the initiative, which is pretty likely, we're going to get to Lay of the Land, so we draw a swamp. That'll be great with our Dread Presence. We've seen the Cruelty of Gix and how it can Grim Tutor on the second chapter, so that's putting a card in our hand. And Staff of Eden, of course, lets us repeatedly draw cards whenever we tap it, if we have permanents in our control that we don't own. So that covers our card advantage section. Here's our acceleration section, which of course, again, I just shorthand as ramp. Soul Ring, everyone knows Soul Ring. Everyone needs Soul Ring. It costs 1, taps for 2, you want it in your deck, especially a deck that has such expensive creatures as we do. Expensive spells, I should say. Wayfarer's Bauble is also great. 1 generic for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we can Lay of the Land. Go find ourselves a swamp, put it in the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. I'm sorry, that's not Lay of the Land, that's Rampant Growth, because it's going right into the battlefield tapped. Pretty good for us in a black deck where we don't have that much land-based ramp. Arcane Signet, also great. 2 generic for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So for this deck, it only taps for black, but it does come in untapped, so it's worth it as a 2 mana rock. Similarly, Charcoal Diamond is exactly the same thing in our deck, except it comes in tapped, and it's still worth running. 2 mana, artifact comes in tapped, taps for black. Yeah, that's great, because it ends up with a black source for us that we can't use the turn it comes in, but for a total amount of mana less than what Wayfarer's Bauble did. Also, this is an expensive card, but we're running Jet Medallion, because it's just excellent in this deck for the amount of big black spells we have. 2 generic for an artifact that makes all of our black spells cost 1 generic less to cast. This does not tap for mana, it just reduces the cost of all of our black spells. Now what that means is, it doesn't reduce the cost of any of these artifacts, because none of these artifacts are black themselves. But it will make Waste Not cost just a single black mana, because it reduces the generic mana cost of black spells. And if we play enough spells in the same turn, it's like this tapped for mana, quote unquote, equal to the number of spells we cast that were black. Pretty good. We've seen Mind Stone, it can tap for generic mana. Waste Not, when an opponent discards a land, we make 2 black. We also have Burnished Heart. I think this is really cool in this deck. I was going to use Solemn Simulacrum, but Burnished Heart seemed like a better, more fun, repeatable way to make this work. So 3 generic for a 2/2 artifact Elk that says if we pay 3 and sacrifice it, we can search our library for up to 2 basic lands, 2 swamps, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So total of 6 mana to be able to double Rampant Growth seems expensive. And it is, that's fair. But what's great about Burnished Heart is we can block with it. We can pay 3, have it come in, let our opponent attack us, block with it, and if we haven't blocked something that has trample, we can respond to the block by activating its ability, and that creature remains blocked, the attacking creature. Meanwhile, our heart goes to the graveyard, we get ourselves 2 swamps, and we're doing better than we were. If we then, with one of our many Reanimate effects, want to bring the heart back, we could sacrifice it again and get more swamps out of our graveyard, or out of our library rather. In any case, the Burnished Heart puts itself in the graveyard when we sacrifice it, which means not only do we have a creature we can reanimate if we want to bring it back, but also it adds to our threshold number for the cards we have in our graveyard in a way that the Sad Robot does not, without us chumping with it or sacrificing it somehow. We've seen Realmbreaker ramps us because it makes an opponent mill 3 cards and we can steal a land from their graveyard. Nyx Lotus, I really like this card from Theros Beyond Death. 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact that comes in tapped. And if we tap it, we choose a color and we add an amount of mana of that color equal to our devotion to that color. Devotion is if we look at all the permanents that we control, we count up the mana symbols, the black pips on them. And that's our devotion to black, or our pips on them of any particular color, and it's our devotion to that color. So if we had Waste Not, Darkness Crystal, and Black Market in play, our devotion to black would be 5, because 1 black pip, 2 black pips, 2 black pips, total of 5. So Nyx Lotus would tap for 5 black mana. It doesn't start off very exciting, but it can really help us out. We've seen the Darkness Crystal. It does the same thing as Jet Medallion in the sense that it discounts by 1 generic mana all of our black spells. But we also have Black Market. 3 and double black for an enchantment that says whenever a creature dies, doesn't have to be our creature, doesn't have to be on our turn, doesn't have to be due to our effects. Whenever a creature dies, any creature, any number, all of the creatures, we put a charge counter on Black Market. And at the beginning of our first main phase, we add a black mana to our mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. Pretty great. Not early game, but it's a 5 mana enchantment. It can make us so much mana over time. Sounds excellent. Finally in this section, we have Nirkana Revenant. Nirkana Revenant is a 4/4 Vampire Shade for 4 and double black. Vampire Shade is a wild creature type. It says whenever we tap a swamp for mana, we add an initial black. So this doubles the mana our swamps produce essentially, even though this is a triggered ability. And for a single black, we can get +1/+1 on the Revenant if we want to. Now, it doesn't have flying, it doesn't have any other kind of evasion, but we could sure hold up 3 swamps, let's say, and then when our opponent attacks, we block with our Revenant, tap 3 swamps for 6 mana, and make it a 10/10. That seems pretty great. We can do that once we've attacked and not been blocked too. In any case, this is a great form of ramp, and because this can be pretty scary, this might be a good removal bait for our opponents. Speaking of removal, since that's our ramp section, let's talk about our interaction section. Again, I just shorthand that as removal. We've seen Black Sun's Twilight. It can kill a creature because it gives a creature -X/-X until end of turn, and maybe reanimate something too. Feed the Swarm is our answer in this black deck for enchantments. 1 and a black for a sorcery that can destroy a creature or an enchantment an opponent controls, but we lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. That's worth doing if the creature or enchantment is so dangerous that we're willing to spend a removal spell on it. Sheoldred's Edict is in this deck, not because it's a perfect spell, but because it's Sheoldred on the spell. It's her edict. And she comes in, our version of Sheoldred, and has an edict effect. It makes our opponent sacrifice a non-token creature. So I wanted to run this because you gotta have a little flavor sometimes. For 1 and a black, we have an instant that we get to force our opponents to either sacrifice a non-token creature, a creature token, or a planeswalker. It's gonna be the same for each opponent, whichever choice we choose, but we do get that choice at least. It will be entertaining. We've seen Braids, how it gives our opponents the ability to either sacrifice their permanents, or lose 2 life and we draw cards, and all it costs us is one of our permanents. Dread Presence can do 2 direct damage to any target. That can be removal. Grisly Spectacle is just go for the throat with mill on top of it. Invasion of Innistrad gives a creature an opponent controls -13/-13 when it flashes in. Liliana can give a creature -X/-X, where X is the number of cards in our graveyard. Phyrexian Obliterator, not exactly a removal spell, but it can do a lot of removing. For quadruple black, we get a 5/5 Phyrexian Horror with Trample that says whenever a source deals damage to this creature, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents of their choice. So that means if Phyrexian Obliterator is blocked by a 3/3, we're going to trample over 2 to our opponent, because the Obliterator is a 5/5 trample, and the Phyrexian Obliterator is going to take 3 from the 3/3. And then that 3/3, after it dies, its controller is going to have to sacrifice 3 permanents. They can sacrifice 3 lands if they want, 3 tokens, 3 treasures, doesn't matter. But they're going to have to sacrifice something. If they block with a 10/10, then the Obliterator will die, it's true. And then that 10/10's controller is going to have to sacrifice 10 permanents, because that's the amount of damage dealt to the Obliterator. It's different if the Obliterator is blocked by or blocks something with Death Touch, something with Death Touch and Trample, etc. But yeah, pretty fun. Ravenous Chupacabra is in here because it is a removal spell on a stick. 2 and double black for a 2/2 Beast Horror. When it enters, we destroy a creature an opponent controls. That's simple. Which is excellent because we can also bring it back and do it again and do it again. Repeated removal is pretty great removal. Of course, the Eldritch Reborn makes our opponents sacrifice creatures and planeswalkers and then makes them discard cards. Seems good. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering, of course, can destroy a creature or planeswalker. Noxious Gearhulk is next. This is 4 and double black for a 5/4 artifact creature construct with Menace. So a 5/4 Menace for 6, already okay. And when it enters, we may destroy another target creature, and if a creature gets destroyed that way, we gain life equal to its toughness. So a little bit of life gain. We've got a couple little spots where that's the case, a couple of places where we're paying life. We're probably going to end up paying a lot more life than we gain in this deck, but it's worth it. It's black. Greatness at any cost. Finally, we've seen Virtue of Persistence and how it has the Locthwain Scorn adventure that will give -3/-3 to something, and we gain 2 life. So one more little bit of life gain for a little bit of interaction. Last in our section of support spells is our group of Wraths. We've seen 3 of these already. Nuclear Fallout, wonderful spell. X and double black, it does twice -X/-X for every creature until end of turn. 1 ring to rule them all. Second chapter destroys all non-legends, and Necromantic Selection destroys all creatures and then reanimates something. We also have Massacre Worm, a great thing for us to use and to reanimate. For 3 and triple black, we get a 6/5 Phyrexian Worm that says when this creature enters, creatures our components control get -2/-2 until end of turn. It's not a huge wrath, but it can kill a lot of things. Anything that's an X2, X1, or of that nature. As well as whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. So the Elves player that doesn't have enough lords to make it so that their 20 creatures had a toughness higher than 2 just lost 20 creatures, and so they just lost 40 life. Pretty great. Massacre Worm also excellent in conjunction with any of these other wraths. Because if Massacre Worm, even if Massacre Worm itself dies, if it's dying at the same time as all these other creatures, it's going to see those other creatures die the same way that it sees itself die. So yeah, it'll be able to trigger off of that. You know, if we were to say Necromantic Selection while Massacre Worm is out, and, you know, each other player has 3 creatures, it's going to see those things die, and so it's going to get a trigger for each of those creatures. So each of our opponent's creatures is going to get, each of our opponents rather is going to lose 3 life, and then maybe we bring back the Necromantic Selection again, or we use Necromantic Selection rather to bring back Massacre Worm. Either way, good fun. So that covers our support for our game plan. We're going to take a look at a couple of other sections of cards that are meant to supplement our game plan and help us get our wins in. starting with this drain section. This is about us doing little bits of direct damage or just causing our opponents to lose a little life, but it adds up over time. Vicious Rumors, of course, deals 1 damage to each opponent, as in the process of making them discard a card and mill a card, and we gain a life. Ayara gains us a life and causes each opponent to lose a life every time she or a black creature enters under our control. Braids, of course, can drain our opponents if they choose not to sacrifice something with the same type that we sacrifice to our trigger. They lose 2 life and we draw a card. Dread Presence can do the 2 direct damage when we gain a life when swamps enter. One Ring to rule them. Has its 3rd chapter, where each creature card in each player's graveyard is worth them losing 1 life. Gary is next. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Gary. 3 and double black for a 2/4 zombie that says when it enters, each opponent loses X life, where X is our devotion to black. We already talked about devotion. And we gain life equal to the amount of life lost this way. Remember, Gary counts his pips and his casting cost for part of the devotion. So even if Gary is the only thing we play, when Gary enters, each opponent's going to lose 2 life, and if we had 3 opponents, that means we're going to gain 6 life. So this is a great way to drain people. Especially if we play this, let it die, and reanimate it once our board is even better. Sir Conrad, of course, 3 different ways to do 1 damage to every opponent. Dreadhound, 2 ways, 1.5 ways, whatever you want to think of it as. It's 2 if Sir Conrad has 4, which it kind of does, to make our opponents lose life. And of course, Massacre Worm we just talked about. Whenever our opponent's creatures die, those opponents lose 2 life. So we've next got our discard section. It is 5 cards that have our opponents discard, and Waste Not, which takes advantage of discard. As we remember, the 2nd chapter on the back side of Sheoldred also makes our opponents discard 3 cards, so a little contribution there as well. In any case, Vicious Rumors, of course, makes our opponents discard a card. Liliana, her +1, makes everyone discard a card, including us. Junji, if we decide not to, when Junji dies, reanimate a non-dragon, we can have each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life. Pretty good. Cruelty of Gix is a targeted hand attack on its 1st chapter, and Eldest Reborn on its 2nd chapter has everyone discard each opponent discard a card. So we don't get to choose what it is that they're discarding, but everyone's going to be discarding something. Finally, we have a tokens section. We have seen all of these, but it's worth noting that these are ways for us to, if we have to sacrifice creatures, or if we need blockers, or maybe sometimes we can swing in with these suckers, it's worth doing. Dread Summons, of course, makes tapped 2/2 zombies once we mill our opponents for each creature card that we mill, as well as cards that we milled of our own. Waste Not gives us zombie tokens as well when opponents discard creature cards. Invasion of Innistraad's backside, Deluge of the Dead, gives us 2 tokens, and then we can eat creature cards from graveyards, or we can rather eat cards from graveyards, and if they were creature cards, we get a zombie. Screeching Scorch Beast, whenever our opponents mill non-land cards, we get zombies. And Arden, of course, kind of reanimates things, but in the form of tokens that are themselves 5/5 black demons. So that covers all of our spells in the deck. We're going to go over, as we always do, the land base. It's not that complicated today. We are running 28 swamps. I know that seems like a lot, and it is, and it's worth it. We have several different ways that we are able to take advantage of the number of swamps we're running, and just the fact that we're running swamps, like Dread Presence, for example. So yeah, we want to make sure we can hit our land drops, so we're running our usual 38 lands, 28 of which are swamps. So we have these 3 fixing lands as well, starting with Crypt of Agadeem from the Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander product. It enters tapped, and it taps for black. It's already okay, but we can also pay 2 and tap it to add a black for each black creature in our graveyard. Black creature card in our graveyard, that is. So if we've filled up our graveyard with, more than 3 creatures, then this is worth doing. Because assuming we have to tap 2 swamps and Crypt of Agadeem to activate this, if we only have 3 creatures, then we've tapped 3 lands to get 3 black mana. It's not that great. But the moment we have 4 or more, this becomes mana positive for us. And what's great about it is it also just taps for black. so we don't have to use this second ability until we have plenty of black creatures in our graveyard. We have Myriad Landscape, which is ramp on a land. It enters tapped, and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type, so 2 swamps. Put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So I know this enters tapped, and when we do this, we're sacrificing it, having to pay for it, and the cards we get are coming in tapped. But this is just us paying mana to turn one of our land drops into 2 lands. So it's slow, but it is ramp, and it's great in our black deck. Similarly is Temple of the False God. Some people don't like this card, I know, but I think it's great, especially for the kind of decks that I built. It's a land that comes in untapped, and it taps for 2 colorless mana. It's a soul land. It just doesn't work unless we have 4 or more additional lands, because you need 5 and it counts itself. So this is a land that taps for 2. It just doesn't work early in the game. That's still fine. So yeah, great for our deck where we're playing a bunch of cards that are high mana value. Next is our utility land section. Some of this utility is kind of small, like Barren Moor. Barren Moor is a tap land that taps for black, but we also have the ability to pay a black and cycle it rather. Cycle it means if we pay a black while it's in our hand and we discard it, we can draw a card. So maybe we just don't need a land, or maybe we want a way to put more cards in our graveyard so that we are able to hit threshold, that kind of thing. Barren Moor is a good way for us to do that. Similarly, we have the Dross Pits. It also enters tapped and taps for black, but while it's in play, we can pay 1 and a black, tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. So not quite as good as cycling, but we can definitely tap it for mana and then sacrifice it for the card draw later. And this is where Sheoldred makes her home, or did, I guess, before she was killed. We have Castle Lochthwain from Eldraine. This land enters tapped unless we control a swamp, which we probably will. So even if it's a tap land, it does still tap for black, and we can pay 1 and double black and tap it to draw a card and lose life equal to the number of cards in our hand. So that can be daunting, I suppose, but sometimes you just need card draw. The ability to repeatedly do that is nothing to sneeze at. Another way for us to get good card draw is War Room. War Room comes in untapped and taps for colorless, but we can pay 3 and tap it and an amount of life equal to the colors in our commander's color identity. So just 1, the number of colors I should say. So this is 3 and tap and 1 life to draw a card. 3 tap, 1 life to draw a card is pretty good. It's probably better actually than Castle Lochthwain, because this is 3 tap and an amount of life equal to the number of cards in hand even after we've drawn that card. The difference though is that Castle Lochthwain can produce black mana. Maybe we need that. Next we have Gyre Reach Sanitarium. We'll talk about this. It's a legendary land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, and we can pay 2 and tap it to make every player draw a card and then discard a card. In a way, that's like Mill. It's not really. It gives selection to everyone. But it is us putting 1 more card in everyone's graveyard, which helps us, and it gives us the selection we want, so maybe we're discarding a creature card in order to reanimate it with a reanimate card we just drew. That's a possibility. We also have Demolition Field, because I love to run Demolition Field. I know that mass land denial is frowned upon in Commander, and that's fair. It's not that much fun. But being able to have a little bit of interaction with lands, if someone has a Rogue's Passage in their Voltron deck that's really killing people at the table, or, I have a friend that runs Glacial Chasm, sometimes someone has a problematic land that you want to get rid of, even if it's not just like a fixing land. Demolition Field is here for that. Comes in untapped, taps for colorless, and if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we can destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls, and then they get to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. So it's even better than Rampant Growth because the basic comes in untapped, and then we get to do the same thing. So it's great because even though we are getting rid of their land and our land, neither of us are down a land because we get to replace it with a basic, and those basics come in untapped. The only reason that would be a bad thing is if our opponent isn't running enough basics. And if that's the case, well, that sure is a choice. We are almost certainly running enough basics. Finally, we have Tomb Fortress from the Warhammer decks. It comes in tapped and taps for black, but we can also pay 2 triple black, tap it, and exile it But if we do, we mill 4 cards and we get to reanimate a creature right away. So a little bit of self-mill, a little bit of reanimation. It does cost us a lot of mana and this land to do that, but sometimes you just need the ability to bring something back. Even as a sorcery, this is a pretty good effect. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making commander decks for each of the legends in March of the Machine's main set and so forth. So let me know in the comments if there is a specific commander you'd like to see me build or a style of deck you'd like to see me build it in. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.